When I found my son's first blanket listed for sale online, with his name stitched right across the edge, my hands went cold. The photo was clear as day, the faded blue fabric, the little embroidered stars, even the small tear on the corner I'd been meaning to fix. I remember staring at the listing, my heart pounding so hard it made my ears ring. The seller's name? Melissa Jenkins, my sister-in-law. It still makes my stomach twist when I think back to that moment, the way my fingers hovered over my phone, unsure whether to call her, cry, or just scream into the empty kitchen. Before everything fell apart, our lives looked simple, normal. Melissa was my husband's younger sister, the fun auntie in the family. She had a loud laugh, always wore bright lipstick, and could charm her way through any situation. When I gave birth to our son, Ethan, she was the first to volunteer to help. "I'll watch him whenever you need a break," she'd say, grinning, holding him like she'd been doing it her whole life. And at first, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Back then, our house smelled of baby powder and coffee. My days blurred between feeding, rocking, and trying to steal a few minutes of sleep. My husband, Daniel, worked long hours at the auto shop, 12-hour shifts that left him exhausted but proud. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And for me, that was everything. I used to keep Ethan's little milestones carefully stored. His hospital bracelet, the onesie we brought him home in, the first lock of hair from his baby trim. Each item went into a small wooden box Daniel had built from leftover pine boards. I'd open it sometimes when the house was quiet, running my fingers over each piece, feeling my heart swell. Melissa visited often those first months. Sometimes she'd bring groceries. Sometimes she'd just show up with coffee and stories about her latest date or her job at the boutique downtown. She'd tease me gently. "You're starting to sound like a mom already, Clara." And I'd laugh because, well, I was one. When I had to return to work part-time, I felt torn in two. We couldn't afford daycare yet, and my mother lived across the state. Melissa offered before I even asked. "Let me watch Ethan. I'm between shifts at the boutique anyway," she said. "It'll be fun. I love that little squish." Daniel thought it was perfect. "She's family," he said, wrapping an arm around me. Who better to trust? I remember the first morning I dropped Ethan off at her apartment. She greeted us in her robe, hair tied up, still smelling of fresh coffee. Her living room was cozy but cluttered. Magazines stacked on the table, scented candles everywhere, a faint trace of perfume in the air. She took Ethan from my arms like she'd been waiting all week. "Go make some money, Mama," she winked. "I got this." I left feeling grateful and maybe a little relieved. Those were the good days. Or at least what I thought were good days. The first small clue came a few weeks later. When I went to pick Ethan up one afternoon, his favorite stuffed bunny was missing. "Did he drop it here?" I asked, glancing around. Melissa barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that old thing? I think he threw it off the porch this morning. I didn't see where it landed." Her tone was casual, but something in her eyes, the quick dart away from mine, felt off. Still, I brushed it aside. Babies lose toys all the time, I told myself, and besides, she was doing me a favor. I didn't want to sound ungrateful. Weeks turned into months. Every now and then, small things went missing. A bib I loved, a pair of tiny shoes my mother had knitted, a framed picture from Ethan's first bath. I thought maybe I misplaced them. After all, I was always tired, juggling shifts and late-night feedings. It was easier to blame myself than question her. Melissa started making odd comments too, about how cluttered my nursery looked, or how I kept too much sentimental junk. "You gotta learn to let go, Clara," she'd say with a smirk. "You're a mom now, not a museum curator." One afternoon, she asked if she could help organize Ethan's room while she babysat at our house. "I'll tidy things up for you," she said, waving her manicured hands. "You'll thank me later." I smiled weakly, grateful for the gesture. But part of me hesitated. Those keepsakes, those weren't just things. They were memories I could hold. When I came home that night, the room did look cleaner. The shelves were neat, the floor vacuumed, and the toy basket sorted, but the keepsake box, the one Daniel had built, was gone from the dresser. "Melissa, where's the wooden box that was here?" I asked. "Oh, I moved it to the closet," she said quickly. "Didn't want Ethan knocking it over when he starts crawling." I opened the closet, and sure enough, it sat on the top shelf, untouched. I didn't even think to open it then. It wasn't until weeks later, on that quiet Wednesday afternoon, that I stumbled across the listing. I had been scrolling through a local resale page, looking for a secondhand stroller when a familiar pattern caught my eye. Blue with stars. Stitched name. Ethan. My chest tightened. I clicked. The description read, "Handmade baby blanket, barely used, sentimental value. $25 or best offer." Melissa's profile picture smiled back at me, cheerful and unaware of the storm she'd just unleashed. I refreshed the page 3 times, hoping maybe it was a mistake. But the details, everyone, matched. Even the background of the photo showed her apartment rug. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt dry, my palms slick. When I called her, she didn't answer. When I texted, "Why is Ethan's blanket on your page?" she replied hours later with a single line, "Oh, that? I thought you didn't want it anymore." That night, I sat on the nursery floor, staring at the empty box. It was lighter than I remembered. When I finally opened it, I realized half the keepsakes were missing: the bracelet, the onesie, the lock of hair. Gone. And in that silence, with only the sound of the baby monitor humming faintly, I felt something inside me shift. Trust, once broken, doesn't make a sound when it cracks. It just leaves a hollow echo. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. The blanket folded neatly, displayed for strangers to bid on, stripped of the warmth it once held. Daniel found me still sitting on the nursery floor when the sun began to rise. "Clara," he said softly, crouching beside me. "What's going on?" I handed him my phone without a word. He stared at the listing, confusion twisting across his face. "Wait, this is Ethan's blanket. Why would she—" His voice trailed off. "I don't know," I whispered. "But the box is half empty. She's been taking things. Selling them?" He shook his head slowly. "No, that doesn't make sense. Melissa wouldn't." But I could see it, clear as day, written in his hesitation. A tiny flicker of doubt. Because deep down, he knew his sister wasn't as innocent as she pretended to be. Melissa had a way of charming people, of twisting the truth until she came out looking like the victim. She'd borrowed money from family before and forgotten to pay it back. She'd been caught lying about shifts at work. And yet, somehow, everyone always forgave her. Not this time. I went to her apartment that morning, heart pounding, clutching the empty keepsake box like evidence in a trial. She opened the door wearing pajamas, a cup of coffee in hand, clearly surprised to see me. "Clara? Where are they, Melissa?" I cut her off. My voice was calm, but my hands trembled. "The blanket. The bracelet. The onesie. Where are they?" Her expression shifted quickly. Confusion, then defensiveness. "What are you talking about?" she said, setting her coffee down. "I told you. I thought you didn't need them anymore." "You thought I didn't need the things I saved from my son's first year of life?" I said, my voice rising. "You sold them, Melissa. You took what wasn't yours." She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "Clara, it's just stuff. You act like I stole money or something. You're overreacting." I felt heat rise up my neck. "Just stuff? That stuff is part of my child's life. You had no right." She rolled her eyes, letting out a small, mocking laugh. "You've always been so sentimental. I thought maybe someone else could actually use them instead of letting them collect dust." I stared at her, disbelief mixing with heartbreak. "You didn't even ask me. Would you have said yes?" She shot back. That silence between us stretched, sharp and cutting. She turned away first, muttering under her breath. "You're lucky I didn't charge you for babysitting all those months." And that was it. the crack wide open, revealing what she really thought. So that's what it was about. Money. I left before I said something I'd regret. Driving home, I could barely see the road through my tears. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. When I got back, Daniel was waiting. He looked up as soon as he saw my face and didn't need to ask. "She admitted it," I said simply. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I'll talk to her." But something in his tone, weary, resigned, told me he wouldn't really do anything. Melissa had always gotten away with everything, especially with him. The next few days were heavy. Every time I looked at Ethan, I thought about the things I'd lost, tiny fragments of moments that would never come back. The blanket he slept with in the hospital, the bracelet that had been too big for his little wrist, the smell of baby lotion and laundry soap still clinging faintly to that first onesie. I filed a report on the resale site, hoping maybe they could remove the listing. By the time they responded, it was too late. It had already been sold. For a while, I tried to move on. But there was something that wouldn't let me rest, a quiet anger that sat heavy in my chest. Melissa still came around, pretending nothing had happened. She'd coo over Ethan, laugh with Daniel, and I'd stand there forcing a smile, feeling like a stranger in my own home. One evening, she showed up unannounced, holding a bag of toys. "Thought I'd drop these off," she said brightly. "From the boutique." A little sorry gift. I took the bag but didn't invite her in. "Melissa, you can't just pretend nothing happened." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "What do you want me to do, Clara? Cry?" I said I was sorry. "You never actually said that," I replied quietly. For the first time, she faltered. Her smile slipped. "Well," she said, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve, "consider this my apology." She turned to leave, but before she did, she added, almost like she couldn't help herself, "Maybe next time, don't leave things lying around if they mean so much to you." That sentence stayed with me. That night, I couldn't shake it. So I went through Ethan's things again. Every drawer, every box, every shelf. And that's when I noticed something else missing, a photo album. The one I'd made with pictures from his first 6 months, hospital photos, his first smile, his first bath. It wasn't on the shelf anymore. My stomach dropped. I called Daniel into the nursery. "Did you move the baby album?" He frowned. "No, why?" "It's gone. She was here this evening, and now it's gone." He rubbed his temples, groaning. "Clara, please. Maybe you misplaced it." I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, or maybe it was denial. But I knew better. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a pattern. I checked Melissa's social media page the next morning, something I hadn't done before. And there it was, a new post. A flat lay of baby clothes and toys, captioned, "Vintage baby collection, cleaning out some treasures. DM if interested." Right there, in the corner of the picture, was the photo album. That was the moment the sadness drained out of me and something colder took its place. I wasn't just going to cry about this anymore. I was going to make sure she never hurt us, or anyone else, like that again. When anger settles, it doesn't burn, it freezes. That's what it felt like the morning I decided to confront Melissa again. Not fire, not chaos, just cold clarity. I wasn't going to shout this time. I was going to show her exactly what she'd done. Before Daniel left for work, I told him, "I'm going to Melissa's today." He hesitated, pulling on his jacket. "Clara, maybe just leave it alone. She's not worth it." "She's family, Daniel," I said quietly. "And that's exactly why it hurts so much." He didn't reply. Just gave me that look, the one that said he wanted peace more than truth. But I didn't want peace built on silence. I waited until Ethan went down for his nap, then drove to Melissa's apartment again. This time, I came prepared. Screenshots of her online listings, photos of the missing items, even a copy of the report I'd filed. Her car was in the driveway, music faintly spilling from the windows. When she opened the door, her smile faltered just slightly. "Wow," she said. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon." "I bet you didn't," I said, stepping inside. "We need to talk." She rolled her eyes, walking toward the kitchen. If this is about that stupid blanket again, I already told you. I placed the printed photos on her counter. No, this is about everything. Her eyes flicked over the papers, listings of Ethan's keepsakes, her profile name, her comments to buyers. Her face tightened. You've been stalking my page? I've been protecting my son's memories, I said. You stole from us, Melissa. She laughed, sharp, incredulous. Oh, please. It's not like I took money or jewelry. You act like I burned your house down. You took things that can't be replaced, I said, voice trembling. Do you even understand what that means? Her expression hardened. You're so dramatic, Clara. You think you're the only one who's ever had it hard? I lost my job. Rent's due next week. I sold a few baby things, so what? You've got a husband and a home. You'll survive. For a moment, the words just hung there. It wasn't just greed. It was jealousy. That bitterness in her tone, the way she looked at me, it was like every resentment she'd ever buried finally surfaced. I took a deep breath. Melissa, if you needed help, you could have asked. We would have found a way. But you lied. You betrayed our trust, she scoffed. You wouldn't have helped. You never really liked me. That's not true, I said softly. I wanted us to be family. I let you in, and you used that kindness against me. Her jaw clenched. For a second, she looked like she might cry. But then her eyes went cold again. Take your pity and leave, Clara. I don't owe you anything. I nodded slowly, my heart breaking in quiet pieces. Then you'll have to deal with the consequences, I said, turning toward the door. Her voice followed me, sharp and defensive. What, you gonna tell Daniel? Go ahead. He always takes my side anyway. I paused at the doorway and looked back at her. No, Melissa, I said. I'm going to tell the truth. To everyone. The next weekend, Daniel's parents hosted their usual Sunday dinner, a tradition that had survived every argument, every grudge. This time, though, I went with a purpose. We gathered around the old oak table, the smell of roast chicken and garlic filling the air. Ethan sat in his high chair, babbling happily. Melissa arrived late, wearing a bright floral dress and her usual air of confidence. Sorry, traffic, she said, kissing her mother's cheek. You wouldn't believe the day I've had. I waited until we'd finished eating. Until the chatter faded and the clinking of dishes softened. Then I spoke. There's something I need to say, I began, my voice steady but low. Everyone turned to me. Daniel, his parents, Melissa. I took a breath. A few weeks ago, I discovered that some of Ethan's keepsakes were missing. I thought maybe I'd misplaced them, until I found them for sale online. On Melissa's page, the room fell silent. Melissa's fork clattered against her plate. Clara, she started, but I held up a hand. I have proof, I said, sliding my phone across the table. The photos and listings glowed on the screen. She sold his blanket, his hospital bracelet, his first onesie. Daniel's mother gasped softly. Melissa, is this true? Melissa's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. She's making me out to be some kind of thief. Are you saying those aren't your posts? Daniel asked quietly. She hesitated. The lie caught in her throat. I needed the money, she finally muttered, eyes darting downward. It wasn't a big deal. Not a big deal? Daniel's father said sharply. You stole from your nephew. From your own brother's family. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with disappointment. Melissa tried to defend herself, but the words came out hollow. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, holding Ethan's tiny hand, letting the truth speak for itself. Daniel reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Quiet. Remorseful, ashamed of his own disbelief. His mother stood slowly, tears in her eyes. Melissa, I think you should leave. For once, Melissa didn't argue. She just grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and walked out the door. That night, Daniel apologized over and over. I should have believed you from the start, he said, voice thick with guilt. I just didn't want to think my own sister could do that. I nodded, too tired to cry. I know. I didn't want to believe it either. He pulled me close. We'll make new memories. We'll fill that box again. Together. His words should have comforted me, and maybe they did a little. But part of me still ached for what was gone. Because no matter how many new moments we created, those first ones were irreplaceable. Weeks passed. Melissa stopped coming around. Rumors spread quietly through the family, whispers about what she'd done, half hidden behind polite smiles. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't post about it. I just let time do its work, and it did. For the first time in months, our home felt peaceful again. But peace doesn't erase pain. It just teaches you to live beside it. And I still had one more lesson to learn about forgiveness. Forgiveness is a quiet thing. It doesn't arrive all at once like a door swinging open. It comes in slow, uncertain steps, through silence, through small moments when anger loosens its grip. I wanted to hate Melissa. I truly did. For weeks, I replayed everything. Her voice, her excuses, the way she laughed when I told her how much those keepsakes meant. But hate didn't heal me. It just kept me tied to her. One rainy afternoon, about a month after the confrontation, I found myself cleaning Ethan's nursery again. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit. Ethan was asleep in his crib, one chubby hand tucked beneath his cheek. I opened the half-empty keepsake box, the one that had started it all, and ran my fingers along the smooth pine edges. Inside were the few things that hadn't been taken. A hospital photo, a small rattle, a card my mother had sent when Ethan was born. Not much, but enough to remind me of what really mattered. I remember whispering to myself, these are just things. He's here. He's safe. That's what counts. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache. Because those keepsakes weren't just physical. They were pieces of the woman I was when I became a mother. And that woman had been naive, trusting, soft-hearted. Maybe that's why it hurt so much. Not only because Melissa betrayed me, but because she'd taken advantage of that softness. 2 weeks later, Daniel came home with a letter in his hand. "It's from Melissa," he said quietly. I hesitated before taking it. The envelope was creased, the handwriting shaky, like she'd rewritten it a few times before sending it. Inside, on a torn piece of lined paper, she'd written, "Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I did something terrible, and I see that now." I was desperate, not just for money, but for attention, for a sense of control. Watching you and Daniel with Ethan made me feel invisible. Like I was the failure in the family. I sold those things because I wanted to feel like I had power again. I hate myself for it. I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to make it right. I've contacted the buyers and got 2 of the items back. I'll bring them over if you'll let me. I'm sorry. Melissa. I read it twice, then handed it to Daniel. He sighed. I don't know what to say. Neither do I whispered. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to hold on to the anger that had protected me for so long. But another part, the tired, motherly part, just wanted to be free of it. A few days later, she showed up at our door. No makeup, no bright clothes, just jeans, a plain sweater, and eyes that looked smaller somehow, humbled. I brought these, she said, holding out a small bag. Inside was Ethan's hospital bracelet and his onesie, folded neatly. I pressed them to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. How did you get them back? I asked softly. I offered to buy them back, she said. One person wouldn't respond, but another mailed them to me after I explained. I used my paycheck. For a long moment, we just stood there in silence, the kind that feels like standing on the edge of something fragile. I don't hate you, Melissa, I finally said. Her lip trembled. You should, I shook my head. I don't have the energy for hate anymore. But I need you to understand. Trust doesn't just grow back. It takes time. I know, she said quietly, and I'll earn it, if you let me. There was sincerity in her eyes this time, not charm, not manipulation. Just regret. I nodded. You can start by being honest. Always. She swallowed hard and whispered, I will. For a while, things stayed tentative. She didn't come over much, but when she did, she helped. Quietly, respectfully. She'd bring groceries or drop off something for Ethan, never expecting anything in return. One evening, as she was leaving, she said, "I'm going to therapy. It's helping." I smiled faintly. "That's good." "Maybe someday," she added. "You'll let me babysit again." I hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe someday." "Not yet." She nodded, understanding. Months passed. Ethan started walking, babbling words that only made sense to him. Daniel and I found our rhythm again, the laughter, the small joys, the peace that had been missing. The keepsake box sat on the dresser, no longer a wound, but a reminder. I added new things now, a photo of his first birthday, a note from Daniel, even one of Melissa's small knitted hats she'd made as an apology gift. Life didn't go back to what it was before. It became something else entirely. Something wiser. One summer afternoon, about a year later, Melissa came to visit. Ethan ran straight to her, laughing, arms wide. She knelt down and hugged him, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I stood in the doorway, watching. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger or suspicion, just a deep, quiet relief, because despite everything, we were still family, imperfect, broken, but still standing. That night, after she left, I tucked Ethan into bed. As I smoothed his blanket, a new one, but with the same little blue stars, he looked up sleepily and said, "Mama, love you." I smiled through tears. "I love you too, baby." And maybe that's the thing about motherhood. It teaches you how to hold pain and love in the same hands. How to let one soften the other. Some nights, when the house was quiet and only the hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and think about how life had changed. The months after Melissa's apology were strangely calm. No explosions. No secrets. Just the steady rhythm of everyday life finding its balance again. But healing isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet. It's the sound of laughter returning to your home. The way your shoulders stop tensing when someone knocks on your door. It's learning to trust again. Not because someone earned it overnight, but because you choose not to live in fear anymore. One Sunday, my mother-in-law, Linda, came over for lunch. It was the first time since the confrontation that the whole family sat together. Daniel, me, Ethan, and Melissa. I'd made roast chicken and potatoes, simple comfort food. The table looked warm, golden in the afternoon light. Melissa helped set the plates, and though her hands shook a little, she didn't hide it. I noticed that, how she didn't try to pretend anymore. During lunch, Linda cleared her throat. "I just want to say something," she began. "What happened months ago, it nearly tore us apart. But I'm proud of both of you." Melissa's eyes widened slightly. "Proud?" Linda nodded. "Yes, because you faced the truth. You didn't run. And Clara." She turned to me, her voice soft. "You found grace in a place most people would have closed their hearts." I looked down, emotion thick in my throat. "I didn't do it for her," I said. "I did it for myself. For Ethan. I didn't want him growing up in bitterness." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "You could have cut me off forever." "You had every right to?" I nodded slowly. "Maybe. But forgiveness isn't about what someone deserves. It's about what you're willing to carry." After lunch, Melissa stayed behind while everyone else went out to the yard to play with Ethan. She lingered by the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I've been saving up," she said quietly. "I started a small handmade craft shop online. I'm donating part of what I earn to a family charity." "That's wonderful," I said genuinely. She gave a nervous laugh. "It's kind of my way of balancing the scales, I guess." I smiled. "You don't owe me a balance, Melissa. You just owe yourself a better story," she blinked, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You always know how to make things sound deeper than they are." "Maybe," I said softly, "but maybe they are deep." A few weeks later, Melissa surprised us again. She brought over a wooden box, hand-carved, polished, with Ethan's initials engraved on the lid. I made it myself, she said shyly. For his keepsakes. I opened it slowly. Inside were the few items we'd salvaged, carefully arranged on soft linen. There was even a little note at the bottom. A new box for new memories. Aunt Melissa. I ran my fingers over the letters, my throat tightening. It's beautiful, I whispered. She smiled through tears. I wanted to give back something real this time. From that day on, something shifted between us. Not the kind of easy closeness we'd once had, that was gone, but something sturdier, more honest. She stopped over every Sunday. Sometimes she'd bring groceries, sometimes just herself and a story to tell. Ethan adored her. He'd tug at her hand and say, "Come play, Auntie Messa," and she'd laugh, the sound soft and different now, less loud, less forced. One evening, after they'd finished building towers out of blocks, Ethan came running to me holding a small blue button. Look, Mama. A treasure. I recognized it immediately. One of the buttons from the original baby blanket Melissa had sold. My breath caught, and I looked over at her. She nodded. Found it in the lining of one of the bags I sold. I kept it for him. I smiled, my heart full. Maybe that's his real keepsake, the one that stayed hidden until it was meant to be found. As time passed, the story of what happened became something we rarely spoke of. Not because we'd forgotten, but because it had turned into something else, a lesson. Daniel once said, "You know what Melissa did? It was awful. But if it hadn't happened, maybe none of us would have learned how fragile we all are." He was right. I used to believe family was about loyalty and love. But now I know, it's also about forgiveness, boundaries, and understanding where love ends and self-respect begins. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat with Ethan on the porch. He was drawing on a piece of paper, his little brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" I asked. He held it up proudly. It was a stick figure family. Me, Daniel, him, and, to my surprise, Aunt Melissa with big orange hair. "She's family too," he said simply. I smiled. Yes, she is. In that moment, I realized something. The story had come full circle. The keepsakes I'd lost weren't really gone. They'd just changed form. They lived now in the laughter around the dinner table, in the new box Melissa carved, in the lessons etched into my heart. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It didn't make Melissa's actions okay, but it allowed me to reclaim my peace and to teach my son that sometimes strength doesn't look like revenge. It looks like letting go. One night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, I whispered, "Do you know why Mama forgave Aunt Melissa?" He looked up, eyes sleepy but curious. "Why?" "Because holding on to hurt makes your heart too heavy. And Mama needed her heart light enough to love you." He smiled, already drifting off. "Love you, Mama." I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Love you more." When I closed the nursery door, I paused by the new keepsake box. I ran my hand over the lid, over the letters carved with care. It wasn't just a box anymore. It was a symbol of everything we'd survived, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the grace that followed. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer defined by what Melissa took from me, but by what I chose to rebuild. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most aren't strangers. They're the ones we once trusted to hold our babies, our secrets, our hearts. When my sister-in-law sold those keepsakes, I thought I'd never forgive her. I thought I'd never look at her without seeing the betrayal. But life has a strange way of softening even the hardest moments. I didn't forgive her because she deserved it. I forgave her because I deserved peace, and maybe that's the quiet truth we all learn sooner or later, that healing isn't about getting even. It's about getting free, because when we finally stop clutching the past, our hands are open to hold something new, something whole. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven her, or would you have walked away for good? Let me know in the comments. And if my story spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the stories we tell help someone else find the courage to let go too.